500 Marines rose as one, their dress blues gleaming under the Newport Academy stadium lights, saluting me while my father's words still echoed in my ears. "You'll never amount to anything, Alexis." I'm Lieutenant Colonel Alexis Rivera, 38, and that was the moment my family realized they'd been cheering for the wrong daughter their entire lives. But let me take you back to where it all began, because the story of how I went from family disappointment to commanding the respect of an entire battalion starts in the most unlikely place, my little sister's college graduation ceremony. I wasn't supposed to be there. Hell, I wasn't even invited. The invitation had arrived at my base in Twentynine Palms 3 weeks prior, addressed to the Rivera Family with a handwritten note on lavender stationery. "Can't wait for everyone to see Natalia graduate Summa Cum Laude from Pemberton University. Love, Mom." Everyone, apparently, didn't include me. I'd been deployed for the better part of 2 years, coordinating logistics operations across 3 continents, sleeping in bunkers while my family built a version of themselves that conveniently left out the daughter who chose duty over dinner parties. The last time I'd spoken to my father, Vincent Rivera, he'd made his opinion crystal clear. 20 years in the military, and what do you have to show for it? Your sister's going to be running international law firms while you're still taking orders. That stung more than shrapnel. But I came anyway, called in favors, rearranged training schedules, and flew commercial in civilian clothes to Millbrook, Connecticut. Not because I expected a warm welcome, but because somewhere deep down, I still hoped they'd surprise me. They didn't. I bought my own ticket to the ceremony, general admission, back section, row K, seat 23. Far enough away that they wouldn't spot me accidentally, close enough that I could watch my little sister achieve everything they'd always said she would, unlike me. The Pemberton University lawn stretched out like a green ocean, dotted with families in their Sunday best. Photographers positioned themselves strategically. The class of 2025 sat in neat rows, caps gleaming, futures bright. And there, 5 rows ahead and to the right, sat my parents. Mom wore the navy dress she'd bought specifically for this day. I knew because she'd posted 17 pictures of it on social media with captions like, "So proud of our graduate," and "One daughter who never disappoints us." Dad sat ramrod straight in his good suit, the one he wore to client meetings at his accounting firm. They looked like the picture of parental pride. For someone else. Natalia looked radiant in her cap and gown, honor cords draped across her shoulders like golden armor. At 24, she was everything they dreamed of: Phi Beta Kappa, law school bound, engaged to a future senator's son. The golden child who never missed a family dinner, never disappointed them, never chosen a path they couldn't brag about at neighborhood barbecues. Watch them beam as her name was called. Natalia Carmen Rivera, Summa Cum Laude, International Relations. The applause was thunderous. Mom dabbed her eyes with the tissue she'd brought specifically for this moment. Dad's chest puffed with pride, so visible you could see it from space. That's when I heard it. Mrs. Patterson from down the street leaned over to my mother and whispered, "You must be so proud. Both your daughters turning out so well?" My mother's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, we only have one daughter worth celebrating today. The other one? Well, let's just say some children choose to disappoint their parents professionally." My father nodded gravely. 20 years playing soldier and she still can't afford a decent car? Natalia will be making more in her first year at Morrison & Associates than Alexis makes in 5. That's the difference between real achievement and playing dress-up. Playing dress-up. I'd spent the last 18 months coordinating humanitarian aid to 3 war-torn countries. I'd saved more lives before breakfast than most people touch in a lifetime. I'd earned commendations from generals whose names appear in history books. But to Vincent Rivera, CPA from Millbrook, Connecticut, I was still just playing dress-up. The ceremony continued around me while I sat in that plastic chair feeling smaller than I had since basic training. Natalia gave her valedictorian speech about building bridges across cultural divides. The crowd loved it. My parents practically glowed. And I sat there, invisible in my own family's story. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from Colonel James Martinez, my commanding officer. Rivera, need you to check your secure email, ASAP. Something big brewing. I stepped away from the ceremony, found a quiet corner near the parking lot, and logged into my military account on my phone. What I saw made my blood run cold, but not for the reasons you'd expect. There was a message marked priority classification with my father's name in the subject line. The email was from General Patricia Hawthorne, Pentagon Liaison for Family Security Clearances. Lieutenant Colonel Rivera, we've detected unusual activity associated with your family members. Please contact headquarters immediately upon receipt. This matter requires urgent attention and may affect your current clearance status. My hands shook as I read it twice, then 3 times. In 12 years of active duty, I'd never received a message like this. Family members don't just randomly show up in Pentagon security briefings unless something's gone seriously wrong. I was about to call the number when I heard the announcement that would change everything. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special surprise for today's ceremony. Please welcome a distinguished guest who couldn't be here in person but wanted to send a message to our graduates. The large screen behind the podium flickered to life, and there he was, General William Cross, Commandant of the Marine Corps, in full dress uniform, speaking directly to the camera. Today, I want to recognize someone in your audience whose service has exemplified the highest ideals of duty, honor, and sacrifice. Someone whose family may not fully understand the magnitude of her contributions to our nation's security. My heart stopped. Lieutenant Colonel Alexis Rivera, if you're watching this, please stand. The world tilted sideways. Every head in that stadium turned, searching. Cameras swiveled. My parents' faces drained of color as 1,200 people looked for the name they'd spent years pretending didn't matter. But that was just the beginning, because what happened next would expose secrets that went far deeper than family disappointment and reveal that sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who've been using your name in ways you never imagined. Comment 1 if you've ever had to prove your worth to people who refused to see it. Let me tell you about Natalia Carmen Rivera, because understanding her is crucial to understanding why that moment hit so hard. Natalia wasn't just the favorite daughter. She was the family's entire identity wrapped up in one perfect package. From the moment she could walk, everything revolved around her potential. Piano lessons at 4, debate team captain at 14, student body president at 17. While I was doing push-ups at dawn during high school ROTC, Natalia was sleeping in after another late night of academic excellence. The difference in how our parents treated us wasn't subtle. It was surgical. When Natalia needed a laptop for college, Dad drove 3 hours to the Apple Store and bought her the top-of-the-line MacBook Pro, then spent the evening setting it up in her room, explaining every feature like she was about to cure cancer with it. When I needed gear for my first deployment, I got a lecture about making responsible financial choices with your military salary. When Natalia made law review at Pemberton, they threw her a surprise party, invited the whole neighborhood, made a slideshow, posted it on every social media platform known to humanity. When I earned my first Bronze Star for leading a convoy through hostile territory, I got a text that said, "Congrats," followed by 3 generic emojis. The morning of her graduation, my mother, Carmen Rivera, had posted an Instagram story that made my stomach turn. It was a photo of her cap and gown laid out on her childhood bed with the caption, "20 years of sacrifice paying off today. Finally have a daughter I can truly be proud of. Hashtag proud mama, hashtag Pemberton grad, hashtag our baby." Finally have a daughter I can truly be proud of. I screenshotted that post and stared at it for 20 minutes in my hotel room. 20 years of military service, 3 combat deployments, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Silver Star I'd never told them about because I'd learned not to bother. But Natalia gets a bachelor's degree, and suddenly Mom has a daughter she can truly be proud of. At the ceremony, watching them in action was like observing a well-rehearsed performance. Dad had brought his professional camera, the expensive Canon he'd bought specifically for documenting Natalia's achievements. Mom carried a designer purse filled with tissues, breath mints, and backup phone batteries because we can't miss a single moment of our baby's special day. They'd arrived 2 hours early to get prime seating. Front section, aisle seats, perfect sight lines to the stage. Dad had even brought a small stepladder hidden discreetly behind his chair so he could get elevated shots over other parents' heads. The woman sitting next to them, Mrs. Henderson from their church, kept commenting on their dedication. "You two are such devoted parents. Natalia is so lucky to have you." Mom practically glowed. "We've always invested in our children's futures. Well, our child's future. Some people make it easy to be proud." That phrase again, some people make it easy to be proud. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Some people, meaning Natalia, make it easy. Other people, meaning me, apparently don't. When they called Natalia's name for her individual recognition as valedictorian, my father actually stood up and applauded, not polite seated clapping. He stood up, put 2 fingers in his mouth, and whistled like he was at a baseball game. Mom held her phone, recording every second, tears streaming down her face. "That's our daughter!" Dad shouted, loud enough for 3 sections to hear. "Our brilliant, beautiful daughter!" The pride in his voice was something I'd never heard directed at me, not once in 38 years. As Natalia spoke about her plans to revolutionize international human rights law, I found myself remembering all the times I'd called home from overseas, hoping to share something meaningful about my work. The refugee camps I'd helped establish, the supply routes I'd secured that kept food flowing to displaced families, the tactical decisions that had prevented casualties. "That's nice, honey. Your sister just got accepted to her dream internship at Harrison Wells and Associates. Did you see her Instagram post about it?" No, I hadn't seen her Instagram post. I'd been too busy coordinating airdrops of medical supplies to earthquake victims in regions most people couldn't find on a map. But here's what really twisted the knife. Natalia was genuinely accomplished. She wasn't some spoiled brat coasting on family favoritism. She'd earned her accolades through hard work and brilliant strategic thinking. In another universe, we might have been allies, even friends. We both understood sacrifice, dedication, and the pursuit of excellence. The tragedy wasn't that she succeeded. The tragedy was that our parents had decided there was only room for one daughter's achievements in their hearts. As I watched them celebrate her, truly, genuinely celebrate her, with the kind of unbridled joy that makes strangers smile, I realized something that cut deeper than any combat wound I'd ever received. They weren't incapable of being proud of a daughter's military service. They were incapable of being proud of me. The ceremony was winding down. Natalia had collected her diploma, posed for official photos, and was making her way through the crowd of well-wishers. My parents flanked her like bodyguards, beaming as relatives and family friends offered congratulations. That's when I heard my father's voice cut through the crowd, crystal clear. "We always knew she'd be something special. Unlike her sister, who's still playing soldier at nearly 40, some people never learn that real success means building something meaningful in the civilian world." Playing soldier. At nearly 40. Never learn. I felt that familiar sensation I trained myself to suppress. The moment when hurt transforms into something harder, colder, more dangerous. In combat, it's the difference between hesitation and decisive action. In family dynamics, it's the difference between walking away and standing your ground. I was about to do something I'd never done before in 38 years of being Vincent Rivera's disappointing daughter. I was about to let them see exactly who they'd been dismissing. The marine dress blue uniform hanging in my hotel room wasn't just fabric and ribbons. It was proof of a life they'd never bothered to understand, decorated with honors they'd never asked about, representing service to something greater than their small-town opinions about what success should look like. But even I had no idea that in less than 60 minutes, I would discover that my father's cruelty went far beyond emotional neglect.
Some betrayals run deeper than words. Some wounds are carved with official documents and forged signatures. The 500 Marines who would soon stand to salute me weren't just honoring my service. They were about to expose a secret that would shatter everything my family thought they knew about loyalty, sacrifice, and who the real hero in our story had been all along. I've been trained to compartmentalize pain. 20 years in the Corps teaches you to lock away hurt, file it under mission irrelevant, and keep moving forward. But sitting in that plastic chair, watching my parents celebrate the daughter they chose while treating me like a stranger they barely tolerated, something inside my chest began to crack. The military doesn't prepare you for this kind of warfare. In combat, you know who the enemy is. The threat is clear, immediate, and you can respond accordingly. But family betrayal operates in shadows, with weapons made of silence and exclusion, with ammunition crafted from years of accumulated dismissal. There's no tactical manual for surviving the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, but have spent decades proving that their love comes with very specific conditions. Conditions I apparently failed to meet. I pulled out my phone. Not to call the Pentagon number yet, but to do something I'd trained myself never to do. Scroll through my mother's social media. Self-torture, really, but I needed to understand the scope of my erasure from their narrative. The evidence was overwhelming. Christmas 2024. Family photo in front of their tree. Dad, Mom, Natalia, her fiancé Bradley. My chair, the one I'd sat in every Christmas morning for 18 years before enlisting, had been removed entirely. Not just empty, gone. As if I'd never existed. Natalia's engagement party, March 2025. 37 photos of the celebration. Speeches from Mom and Dad about our beautiful daughter finding her perfect match. A toast to the future we've always dreamed of for our family. Not one mention that they had another daughter. Not even a generic, we wish Alexis could be here. Mother's Day, May 2025. A heartfelt post about the joy of raising a daughter who makes you proud every single day. One daughter. Singular. I'd sent flowers from Qatar, where I was stationed at the time. The delivery confirmation showed they'd been received. But somehow that gesture didn't merit even a footnote in Mom's public gratitude. The pattern was surgical in its precision. They hadn't just decided I was disappointing, they had systematically edited me out of their family story. To anyone following Carmen Rivera's social media, the Riveras were a family of 3, 2 parents and 1 exceptional daughter. I'd become a ghost in my own family. The worst part wasn't the exclusion itself. It was the effort it required. Cropping me out of photos takes intention. Avoiding any mention of my service takes deliberate choice. Removing my chair from the Christmas setup takes planning. This wasn't neglect. It was conscious construction of a reality where I simply didn't matter. My hands were shaking as I scrolled, and I forced myself to put the phone away. Focus, Rivera. You've handled worse than this. Remember Kandahar province when your convoy was pinned down for 6 hours and you had to keep 23 Marines calm while calling in air support? Remember coordinating the evacuation of the embassy in Tegucigalpa when the government fell? You've commanded men and women through life and death situations that would break most people. But somehow, sitting at my sister's graduation while my parents publicly disowned my existence, I felt more vulnerable than I'd ever felt under enemy fire.
The ceremony was transitioning to the reception phase. Families were moving toward the lawn area where refreshments had been set up under white tents. I watched my parents walking arm in arm with Natalia, accepting congratulations from other families, posing for endless photos. The perfect family unit, complete and happy. I should have left. Every instinct I'd developed over 2 decades of military service told me to execute a strategic withdrawal, regroup, and reassess. Cut your losses, Rivera. Some battles aren't worth fighting. But then I heard Dad's voice again, carrying across the crowd as he spoke to Dr. Morrison, Natalia's faculty advisor. We're so grateful Natalia chose law over other pursuits. Some young people get distracted by fantasies about military service, thinking it's noble or patriotic. But real contribution to society happens in boardrooms and courtrooms, not foxholes. We raised her to understand that distinction. Fantasies about military service? Real contribution to society? The words hit me like physical blows. This wasn't just disappointment or misunderstanding anymore. This was active contempt for everything I dedicated my life to. In his mind, I wasn't just a failure. I was delusional for thinking my service mattered at all. I thought about Lieutenant Sarah Chen, who died in my arms after an IED explosion outside Mosul. 23 years old, killed while delivering medical supplies to a refugee camp. Was her sacrifice a fantasy? Was the Purple Heart I'd helped pin to her mother's dress at the funeral ceremony just elaborate theater? I thought about the evacuation I'd coordinated in Honduras, where we'd pulled 47 American civilians out of an active war zone in less than 12 hours. 3 of them were pregnant women. One gave birth on the transport helicopter. When that baby took her first breath at 30,000 feet, was that a fantasy too? I thought about the commendation letter from General Patricia Hawthorne that I'd never shared with my family. Lieutenant Colonel Rivera's tactical brilliance and unwavering dedication have saved countless lives and prevented international incidents that could have destabilized entire regions. Her service represents the highest ideals of American military excellence. But to Vincent Rivera, CPA, I was just his older daughter playing dress-up in a uniform, too foolish to pursue real success like her younger sister. The rage building in my chest wasn't the hot, explosive kind that gets Marines in trouble at bars. This was something colder, more controlled. The kind of anger that had fueled me through officer candidate school when my drill instructor told me women didn't belong in combat roles. The kind that had pushed me to volunteer for the most dangerous assignments, not to prove something to others, but to prove something to myself. I was done being invisible. I was done being erased. I was done pretending it didn't matter that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had spent 20 years making it clear that their love had very strict conditions. Conditions I would apparently never meet. But as I sat there, feeling that familiar steel resolve settling into my bones, I had no idea that my phone was about to ring with information that would change everything. Not just about my relationship with my parents, but about crimes that had been committed in my name, documents that had been forged with my signature, and financial fraud that stretched back years. The Pentagon wasn't calling about routine security clearance updates. They were calling because someone in my family had been using my military credentials for purposes that would soon land them in federal prison. Vincent Rivera hadn't just dismissed my service as fantasy. He'd been systematically exploiting it for personal gain while publicly treating me like a disappointment. And in less than 30 minutes, 500 Marines would stand to salute not just my service, but my survival of betrayals that went deeper than any combat wound I'd ever sustained. The woman they'd spent decades erasing from their family story was about to become the only story that mattered. My phone rang at exactly 2:47 p.m. The caller ID showed a number I recognized immediately: Pentagon main switchboard. My heart hammered against my ribs as I answered. "Lieutenant Colonel Rivera speaking?" "Colonel, this is Sergeant Major Williams from General Hawthorne's office. I need you to remain exactly where you are. Do not move from your current location. A priority transport has been dispatched to your coordinates. ETA, 12 minutes. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my mind racing through possibilities. Priority transports aren't dispatched lightly.
They're reserved for national security emergencies, active threats, or situations requiring immediate military intervention. Whatever was happening, it was big enough to pull a decorated officer from her sister's graduation. But 12 minutes? They'd already known exactly where I was. I was still processing this when I heard the distant sound that would change everything. The rhythmic pulse of helicopter rotors cutting through the Connecticut afternoon air. At first, it was just a whisper on the wind, barely audible over the graduation reception chatter, but it was growing louder. Families around the lawn area began looking up, shading their eyes against the sun. The casual conversation died down as the mechanical thunder grew more pronounced. Someone pointed toward the eastern horizon where a dark speck was rapidly approaching. My father was in the middle of another conversation about Natalia's bright future in international law when the helicopters became visible. Not helicopter, helicopters, plural. 3 UH-60 Blackhawks were approaching in perfect formation, their rotors churning the air into visible waves of heat distortion. The lead aircraft bore the distinctive markings of Marine Corps executive transport. This wasn't a routine pickup. This was a show of force. The graduation reception ground to a complete halt. 1,200 people stood transfixed as the helicopters circled the university lawn once before beginning their descent. Tables scattered, cups and plates flew in all directions.
The carefully arranged graduation banners whipped like flags in a hurricane. I stood slowly, my military bearing taking over despite the chaos in my chest. 20 years of training kicked in automatically. Straighten the shoulders, set the jaw, prepare for whatever comes next. But inside, my mind was screaming questions I couldn't answer. The lead helicopter touched down first, its rotors still spinning at full speed. Before the skids had fully settled on the grass, the side doors slid open and a figure emerged that made my blood run cold. General Patricia Hawthorne herself, 4 stars gleaming on her shoulders, combat ribbons covering half her chest, the kind of military presence that makes hardened Marines stand straighter just by existing in the same zip code. She was flanked by 2 Marine Corps honor guards in dress blues so pristine they looked like they'd been pressed with military precision 30 seconds before stepping off the aircraft. But it was what happened next that turned the graduation reception into something nobody present would ever forget. The honor guards moved with synchronized precision, forming a pathway from the helicopter to where I stood frozen among the scattered graduation chairs. And then, from the other 2 helicopters, they began emerging. Marines. Lots of them. Not just any Marines. These were dress blue Marines, each one bearing the distinctive markings of various elite units. Force reconnaissance, Marine raiders, embassy security groups, combat engineers, logistics specialists, communications experts, a cross-section of the Corps' finest, all in full ceremonial uniform. They formed ranks with the kind of precision that only comes from thousands of hours of drill practice. Perfectly straight lines, exact spacing, every movement synchronized down to the millisecond. The kind of military pageantry usually reserved for presidential ceremonies or Medal of Honor presentations. 50 Marines, 100, 200, they kept coming. The graduation crowd pressed backward, creating a wide circle around the impromptu formation. Camera phones appeared everywhere, recording what was clearly an unprecedented event. Local news crews were already being called. This was the kind of spectacle that would be on every social media platform within minutes. My parents stood paralyzed 20 feet away, their faces cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and something approaching fear. Natalia clutched her diploma against her chest, her mouth open in shock. The perfect family photo moment had been replaced by a military operation happening in real time on their daughter's graduation day. But they weren't done. From the lead helicopter, General Hawthorne approached with measured steps, her bearing radiating the kind of authority that had commanded respect in congressional hearings and Pentagon briefings.
She carried herself like someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room, which, given her position as the highest-ranking female officer in Marine Corps history, was usually accurate. She stopped 3 feet in front of me and executed a perfect military salute. Lieutenant Colonel Alexis Rivera, by order of the Commandant of the Marine Corps and with the authorization of the Secretary of Defense, you are hereby summoned for immediate consultation on matters of national security importance. Her voice carried across the silent lawn like a gunshot. Every word was crystal clear, designed to be heard by every person present. This wasn't just official business being conducted. This was a public declaration. Furthermore, General Hawthorne continued, her voice rising slightly, the Marine Corps wishes to publicly acknowledge your exceptional service record, which includes 3 Bronze Stars, 1 Silver Star, and the Distinguished Service Cross for actions that prevented international incidents and saved countless civilian lives. A ripple of shocked murmurs swept through the crowd. Phones were recording everything. The Distinguished Service Cross is the second highest military decoration for valor, awarded only to those who demonstrate extraordinary heroism in combat situations. My father's face had gone pale as fresh snow. The Marines you see assembled here, the general continued, gesturing toward the formation, represent units that have served under your command or benefited directly from your tactical decisions and leadership. They have requested permission to render honors. That's when it happened. 497 Marines, I would learn the exact count later, came to attention simultaneously. The sound of their movement was like a thunderclap. Boots snapping together, spines straightening, arms moving to parade rest position. And then, as one, they saluted. Not the quick, casual salute of routine military courtesy. This was the long ceremonial salute reserved for the most solemn military occasions. 497 hands raised in perfect unison, held steady while General Hawthorne spoke words that would echo in my mind forever. Lieutenant Colonel Rivera, these Marines stand to honor not just your service, but your sacrifice. They stand to acknowledge that true heroism isn't always visible to those closest to us, but it is always recognized by those who matter. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. 30 seconds of nearly 500 Marines holding perfect salutes, while 1,200 civilians witnessed a display of military respect that most people never see in their entire lives. When they finally dropped their salutes in perfect synchronization, the sound echoed across the lawn like distant thunder. My parents stood frozen, their faces reflecting the dawning realization that they had fundamentally misunderstood who their daughter was and what she had accomplished. The woman they had dismissed as playing soldier was being honored by the most elite fighting force in the world. But General Hawthorne wasn't done. Colonel Rivera, we need to depart immediately. There are urgent matters requiring your expertise, and there are some questions about your family that require immediate clarification. My family. Questions that require immediate clarification.
As I walked toward the helicopter, my legs moving on autopilot while my mind reeled, I caught a glimpse of my father's expression. The arrogance was gone. The dismissive superiority had evaporated. For the first time in 38 years, Vincent Rivera was looking at me with something that might have been respect or terror. Because somewhere in the back of his accounting mind, he was probably starting to realize that if the Pentagon was asking questions about the Rivera family, there might be financial records that wouldn't survive close examination. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying me toward answers I wasn't sure I wanted to hear, I looked down at the graduation ceremony that had been transformed into something none of us could have predicted. 497 Marines had just announced to the world that Lieutenant Colonel Alexis Rivera mattered. Now I was about to discover exactly why that terrified my father so much. The helicopter ride to Westover Air Reserve Base took exactly 23 minutes. I know because I spent every second of that flight watching the landscape blur beneath us while trying to process what had just happened. General Hawthorne sat across from me, her expression unreadable, occasionally checking her secure tablet, but otherwise maintaining the kind of professional silence that indicated we were dealing with classified material. But my mind wasn't on national security protocols. It was replaying the look on my father's face when those Marines saluted. Pure terror. Not surprise, not confusion, not even embarrassment at having publicly dismissed a decorated war hero. Terror. The kind of fear that comes when someone realizes their carefully constructed lies are about to collapse under the weight of official scrutiny. Colonel, General Hawthorne spoke for the first time since takeoff. I need you to understand that what we're about to discuss may fundamentally change your relationship with your family. Are you prepared for that possibility? I met her gaze steadily. Ma'am, my relationship with my family changed a long time ago. They made sure of that. She nodded, as if this confirmed something she already knew. What I'm about to tell you has been classified under national security protocols for the past 18 months. We've been conducting a parallel investigation while building our case, but recent developments have accelerated our timeline. The helicopter banked left, beginning its descent toward the base. Through the window, I could see military vehicles arranged in precise formations, the kind of security presence usually reserved for visiting dignitaries or high-value assets. Colonel Rivera, someone has been using your military credentials to access classified procurement systems. Someone with intimate knowledge of your deployment schedules, your clearance levels, and your family financial information. The perpetrator has been systematic, careful, and extremely well-informed about military bureaucracy. My stomach dropped. How much are we talking about, General? $2.7 million over the course of 4 years. Fraudulent contracts for military equipment that was never delivered, consulting fees for services never rendered, and emergency procurement authorizations for operations that never existed. $2.7 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't petty theft or opportunistic fraud. This was organized, sustained criminal activity using my name, my reputation, and my security clearance as collateral. The signature analysis came back conclusive yesterday. Digital forgeries, but sophisticated ones. Whoever did this had access to multiple samples of your authentic signature and used professional-grade software to create believable replicas. This level of forgery requires resources, time, and detailed knowledge of your personal habits. As we touched down on the tarmac, I was already running through the possibilities in my mind. Military contractors who might have had access to my paperwork, fellow officers who might have harbored resentment, administrative personnel with clearance to handle sensitive documents. But deep in my gut, I already knew who it was. The helicopter's rotors wound down as we were escorted into a secure briefing facility. The room was standard military, fluorescent lighting, gray walls, a conference table that had seen 1,000 classified meetings. But what wasn't standard was the amount of documentation spread across that table. Financial records, bank statements, procurement contracts, email transcripts, and in the center of it all, a thick folder marked Rivera, Vincent, subject of investigation. My father's name and official Pentagon documentation. Colonel Rivera, a JAG officer I recognized from previous legal briefings, his expression was grim. We've been building this case for 2 years. Your father has been systematically exploiting your service record for personal financial gain. He opened the folder and spread out a series of documents that made my hands shake with rage. He filed paperwork with the Small Business Administration claiming to be your designated financial proxy while you were deployed. He used forged power of attorney documents to establish himself as the authorized representative for Rivera Military Consulting Services, a company that never existed but somehow secured multiple government contracts. The papers showed a pattern of calculated deception that went back to my second deployment. While I was coordinating supply routes in hostile territory, risking my life to ensure American forces had the resources they needed to survive, my father was back home forging my signature on contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He claimed you were providing strategic consultation on Middle Eastern logistics operations from classified locations. The contracts were written to make it appear that you were earning substantial consulting fees for expertise gained during active duty service.
Colonel Thompson pointed to a series of bank statements. The money was deposited into accounts he established using your Social Security number and military ID information. He then transferred the funds through multiple shell companies before eventually funneling them into his personal accounts and real estate investments. Real estate investments, I repeated, my voice hollow. Your parents' house was purchased with fraudulent military contract money. So was their vacation property in Vermont, their cars, their country club membership, your sister's private school tuition and her college expenses. Natalia's entire education was funded by money stolen using your military service as cover. The room spun slightly. Everything I'd watched them celebrate. Natalia's achievements, their comfortable lifestyle, their ability to look down on my modest military salary had been built on crimes committed in my name. "There's more," General Hawthorne said quietly. "Your father has been claiming you as a business partner for tax purposes. He's been writing off family expenses as legitimate business costs for this fictional consulting company. The IRS has been investigating him separately, and our two investigations converged when they discovered the military contract fraud." I thought about every family gathering where Dad had made snide comments about my financial situation. Every time he'd implied that I was irresponsible with money, that I wasn't building a real future like Natalia. Every cruel joke about my inability to afford the lifestyle they enjoyed. He'd been living off my stolen valor while mocking me for being poor. The graduation ceremony today wasn't just an honor ceremony. It was also an arrest operation. While you were being recognized for your legitimate service, federal agents were serving search warrants at your parents' home, their business, and their bank. My phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "This is Detective Lisa Park with Connecticut State Police. Your family has been taken into custody pending federal charges. We need to speak with you urgently." I showed the message to General Hawthorne, who nodded grimly. "Colonel Rivera, I need you to understand something. Your father didn't just steal money. He used your military reputation to commit crimes that could have compromised national security. Some of the contracts he fraudulently obtained were for sensitive military equipment. If that equipment had actually been delivered to unauthorized parties, we could have been looking at a major security breach." The magnitude of the betrayal was almost incomprehensible. Not only had my family stolen from me financially, but they'd put American military operations at risk by fraudulently accessing classified procurement systems. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you help us finish the investigation, and then you decide what kind of justice you want to pursue. Because Vincent Rivera doesn't just owe the government $2.7 million, he owes you 20 years of stolen dignity, fraudulent use of your identity, and systematic destruction of your financial future." As I sat in that briefing room, surrounded by evidence of my father's crimes, I realized that the 500 Marines who had saluted me weren't just honoring my military service. They were honoring my survival of a betrayal so profound that it had turned my own family into criminals who profited from my sacrifice while publicly treating me like a failure. The woman they'd spent decades erasing from their family's story had just become the key witness in a federal criminal case that would destroy everything they'd built on lies. And this was only the beginning. 3 hours later, I was sitting in the Secure Communications Center at Westover when Colonel Thompson received a call that changed everything. I watched his face go pale as he listened, occasionally jotting notes on a classified notepad. When he hung up, he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on a JAG officer's face before. Fear. "Colonel Rivera, we have a problem. A big one." He activated the room's secure display system and pulled up a series of documents that made my blood run cold. Not because of what they showed, but because of what they implied. Your father's fraud was more sophisticated than we initially realized. The investigation team just discovered that he didn't just forge your signature on procurement contracts, he's been impersonating you in official military communications. The screen showed email correspondence bearing your name, your rank, and your official military signature block. Messages sent to Pentagon procurement officers, Defense Department contractors, and international military liaisons, all appearing to come from me, all completely fraudulent. Vincent Rivera somehow gained access to military communication protocols. He's been sending emails from what appeared to be legitimate military servers, using your identity to authorize equipment transfers, personnel assignments, and classified information exchanges. I stared at the screen, reading messages I'd never written, seeing my name attached to decisions I'd never made. The technical sophistication required for this level of fraud was staggering. This goes beyond financial theft, Colonel Thompson continued. Some of these communications involve international partners, NATO allies, coalition forces, civilian contractors working in active combat zones. If foreign governments discover that official U.S. military communications were fraudulent, we're looking at a diplomatic crisis. General Hawthorne entered the room carrying a red folder, the kind reserved for the highest classification levels. Colonel Rivera, I've just spoken with the Secretary of Defense. This investigation is now a matter of national security priority. We need to know how your father gained access to classified military communication systems. That's when the real scope of the betrayal began to emerge.
The technical analysis shows that whoever did this had insider knowledge of military protocols, access to current encryption keys, and detailed understanding of Department of Defense bureaucracy. This level of access typically requires either high-level security clearance or assistance from someone within the military establishment. My mind raced through the implications. You're saying someone on the inside helped him? We're saying your father couldn't have done this alone. The sophistication of the fraud, the access to classified systems, the knowledge of military procedures. Someone with legitimate clearance was either actively helping him or was compromised in a way that gave him access to their credentials. Colonel Thompson pulled up another screen showing a timeline of the fraudulent activities. The pattern is too precise, too well-timed with your actual deployments. Whoever helped him knew your exact whereabouts, your mission schedules, and your communication protocols. They knew when you'd be in situations where you couldn't immediately detect or respond to the fraud. The implications were terrifying. Not only had my father been stealing money using my identity, but someone within the military had been feeding him classified information about my operations. Someone I'd trusted, someone I'd served alongside, someone with access to information that could have endangered my life and the lives of Marines under my command. General, I said slowly, if someone was tracking my movements and schedules that precisely, they would have known when I was in maximum danger zones. They would have known when I was leading convoy operations, coordinating airlifts, or operating in hostile territory. General Hawthorne nodded grimly. That's exactly what concerns us. The timing of some of the fraudulent activities suggests that whoever was helping your father knew when you were most likely to be unable to respond to inquiries. Unable to respond. Military euphemism for potentially dead. You're telling me that someone was hoping I wouldn't come back from my deployments so the fraud could continue undetected? We're telling you that's a possibility we have to investigate. The level of coordination required for this fraud suggests either extensive planning to work around your survival or... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. My phone rang. Detective Lisa Park from Connecticut State Police. Colonel Rivera, I'm at your parents' residence with the search warrant team. We need you to know something urgently. Your father is claiming that you were a willing participant in the consulting business. He's providing documentation that he says proves you authorized all the financial transactions. That's impossible. He's shown us what appears to be a series of text messages between you and him discussing the business operations, messages sent from your personal phone number while you were deployed overseas. I felt the world tilt sideways. Detective, I need you to understand something. I have my phone with me right now. I've had the same phone and the same number for 3 years. If there are text messages from my number that I didn't send, then someone has been spoofing my communications. That's what we were afraid you'd say. The line went quiet for a moment while she consulted with someone in the background.
Colonel, there's something else. Your sister Natalia is here and she's asking to speak with you. She says there are things about your father's business that she thinks you need to know. She seems scared. Natalia, the golden child who'd been the center of my parents' universe, the daughter who'd been funded by money stolen in my name. What could she possibly know about Dad's criminal enterprise? Put her on the phone. A few seconds later, I heard my sister's voice for the first time in 2 years. She sounded small, frightened, nothing like the confident graduate who'd been celebrated just hours earlier. Alexis, oh my God, Alexis, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what Dad was doing. Natalia, slow down. What are you talking about? The business, Rivera Military Consulting. Dad told me you were a silent partner, that you were earning money from your military expertise, but couldn't talk about it because of security clearances. He said the money for my college, for the house, for everything, he said it was legitimate consulting income from your service. My sister had been told I was financially supporting the family through military consulting work. While my parents were publicly treating me like a failure, they were privately telling her that I was funding her lifestyle. But Alexis, there's more. Dad has been meeting with someone in uniform. I saw them at the house multiple times when I was home from college. A military officer who knew things about your deployments, your schedule, your missions. They would spend hours in Dad's office going over papers and computer files. Did you get a name, a rank? Can you describe this person? I never got a name, but I saw the rank insignia. It was a major, Marine Corps. And, Alexis, I think they were planning something bigger. I heard them talking about your next deployment, about how they needed to accelerate the timeline before you came back stateside permanently. The blood drained from my face. Accelerate the timeline. They weren't just stealing money. They were racing against the clock of my military career. Someone was helping my father commit fraud with the specific goal of maximizing the theft before I transitioned out of active duty and gained more control over my personal affairs. Natalia, this is very important. When was the last time you saw this major at the house? 2 weeks ago, right after Dad got a call saying you were being recalled from your current assignment for some kind of special ceremony. The major seemed upset about it, said the timing was problematic for ongoing operations. My recall for today's graduation ceremony. Someone had inside information about that too.
Colonel Rivera, General Hawthorne interrupted, having listened to the entire conversation. We need to move fast. If there's a compromised major feeding information to your father, they know we're investigating. They know you're here, and they know their operation is blown. She activated her secure communicator. This is General Hawthorne. We have a code red security breach. I need immediate background checks on all Marine Corps majors with access to deployment schedules for Lieutenant Colonel Rivera's unit. And I need a protective detail assigned to Colonel Rivera immediately. As federal agents and military investigators mobilized around me, I realized that my family's betrayal was just the tip of the iceberg. Somewhere in the Marine Corps, an officer I'd trusted was actively working to destroy my career, steal my identity, and potentially endanger my life. The graduation ceremony that had started as public humiliation was turning into the opening move of a military investigation that would expose corruption reaching into the highest levels of command. The secure terminal in front of me displayed a name that made my entire world collapse. Major Derek Castellanos, my former executive officer. The man who'd served under my command for 3 years, who'd eaten Christmas dinner with my unit in Afghanistan, who'd written recommendation letters for my promotion to lieutenant colonel. The man I'd trusted with my life. Colonel Rivera, Colonel Thompson said quietly, watching my face as I processed the information. Major Castellanos has been under surveillance for the past 48 hours. The evidence is comprehensive. The screen filled with surveillance photos, financial records, and communication logs that painted a picture of betrayal so systematic it took my breath away. Derek Castellanos hadn't just
helped my father commit fraud, he'd orchestrated the entire operation. The investigation shows that Major Castellanos approached your father first, approximately 5 years ago. He'd been studying your family dynamics, your financial situation, and your parents' attitudes toward your military service. He identified your father as someone who could be manipulated into participating in a long-term fraud scheme. General Hawthorne pulled up a series of recorded phone calls between Derek and my father. We obtained these through a FISA warrant after discovering the national security implications. Listen to this conversation from 3 years ago. Derek's voice filled the secure briefing room, casual and confident. Vincent, you need to understand that Alexis is sitting on a gold mine of consulting opportunities. Her security clearance, her operational experience, her contact network, it's worth millions if leveraged correctly. The only reason she's not capitalizing on it is because she's too idealistic about military ethics. My father's response was exactly what I would have expected. She's always been naive about money, too focused on honor and duty nonsense. But how would we access these opportunities without her knowledge? That's where I come in. I have access to her deployment schedules, her mission parameters, her communication protocols. More importantly, I understand the procurement system well enough to create legitimate-looking contracts that she could theoretically fulfill from her current positions. Derek had spent 3 years studying me, learning my patterns, my ethics, my blind spots. He'd identified my father's resentment and financial ambitions as the perfect entry point for a massive fraud operation. The beauty of the plan, Derek continued in another recording, is that Alexis's own integrity works against her. She's so focused on her missions and her Marines that she doesn't pay attention to her personal finances. She trusts the system to handle her administrative details while she handles the dangerous work. He was right. I'd been so focused on keeping my Marines alive and completing our missions that I'd never questioned the financial arrangements my father claimed to be managing for me. I'd trusted that my family had my best interests at heart while I was overseas, risking my life for my country. Colonel Thompson pulled up another document that made my hands clench into fists. This is the most damaging evidence. Major Castellanos didn't just steal money, he actively endangered your operations to protect the fraud scheme. The document showed a series of communications where Derek had deliberately delayed critical supply deliveries to missions I was leading. Equipment that should have reached my unit within 24 hours was held up for weeks, forcing us to operate with inadequate resources in hostile territory. You're telling me that Derek deliberately put my Marines at risk to steal money? We're telling you that Major Castellanos saw your combat effectiveness as a threat to his operation. Every successful mission you completed, every commendation you earned, every demonstration of your competence made it more likely that you'd be promoted to positions where you'd have greater oversight of your own administrative affairs. General Hawthorne activated another screen showing Derek's personnel file. Major Castellanos has been passed over for promotion twice. His performance evaluations consistently noted his resentment toward officers who advanced faster than he did, particularly female officers. The pattern became clear with sickening precision. Derek hadn't just resented my success, he'd actively worked to undermine it while profiting from my reputation. He'd stolen my identity, endangered my Marines, and manipulated my father's existing resentment to create a criminal enterprise that had lasted for years. There's more, Colonel Thompson said, his voice grim. The timeline analysis shows that some of your most dangerous assignments may not have been random. Major Castellanos had influence on deployment schedules in his logistics coordination role. We believe he may have actively requested that you be assigned to high-risk operations. The implication hit me like a physical blow. He was trying to get me killed? It's a possibility we're investigating. The insurance policies, the beneficiary arrangements, the accelerated timeline. Everything suggests that Major Castellanos was planning for the possibility that you wouldn't survive your deployments.
My phone buzzed with an encrypted message from the investigative team at my parents' house. Additional evidence discovered. Major Castellanos had duplicate keys to the Rivera residence and a dedicated workspace in the basement. Multiple computers, forged documents, and what appears to be surveillance equipment for monitoring Colonel Rivera's communications. Derek had been living a double life. While serving as my trusted officer during the day, he'd been spending his off-duty hours in my parents' basement, running a criminal operation that used my identity to steal millions of dollars from the United States government. The psychological profile is disturbing, General Hawthorne continued. Major Castellanos appears to have developed an obsessive hatred for your success. He's been documenting your career progression, your awards, your media coverage from military ceremonies. He has files detailing every promotion you received that he believed he deserved instead. She pulled up photos from Derek's workspace that showed walls covered with newspaper clippings about my military achievements, photos from award ceremonies, and copies of my performance evaluations. But they weren't displayed with pride. They were marked up with angry handwriting, circled dates, and what appeared to be detailed plans for sabotage. He's been planning this for longer than 5 years, Colonel Thompson said. Some of these documents date back to your time at the Command and Staff College. He's been tracking your career and looking for opportunities to undermine you for nearly a decade. The scope of the betrayal was almost incomprehensible. Derek hadn't just committed fraud. He'd waged a psychological war against me for years, using my own family as weapons while serving under my command. He'd eaten meals with me, participated in unit ceremonies, and earned combat ribbons, while simultaneously working to destroy everything I'd built. Colonel Rivera, General Hawthorne said, "We need you to understand that Major Castellanos is still on active duty. He's still serving in a position where he has access to classified information and operational details about Marine Corps activities. We believe he may be planning something drastic now that his operation has been exposed." What kind of drastic? The kind that eliminates witnesses and evidence. The investigation team found encrypted communications between Castellanos and unknown parties discussing contingency protocols and asset protection measures. He knows we're closing in, and he knows you're the key witness who can destroy him. My secure phone rang. The caller ID showed Major Derek Castellanos. "General Hawthorne," she said urgently, "do not answer that call. We're tracing it now, but we need you to understand that Major Castellanos is likely attempting to manipulate you into a situation where he can control the narrative or eliminate the evidence." The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. "He's persistent," Colonel Thompson observed. "That suggests desperation. He knows his operation is blown, and he's probably trying to find out exactly how much we know." "General," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest, "I want to answer that call. With your permission, and with this conversation being recorded, I want to hear what Derek Castellanos has to say to the woman whose life he's been systematically destroying for the past decade." "Colonel Rivera, that could be extremely dangerous. If he's desperate enough, he might—" "Ma'am, with respect, I've spent 20 years dealing with people who wanted to destroy American interests. The fact that this one happened to wear a Marine uniform and eat at my family's dinner table doesn't change the fundamental nature of the threat." General Hawthorne looked at me for a long moment, then nodded to the technical team. "Record everything, trace the call, and be ready to dispatch protective assets if this conversation goes south." The phone rang a third time. I answered it. "Derek," I said, my voice calm and professional, "I was wondering when you'd call." "Alexis." Derek's voice was exactly as I remembered, calm, professional, with that slight hint of superiority he always carried when he thought he was the smartest person in the room. "I suppose congratulations are in order. That was quite a show at the graduation ceremony today."
Cut the bullshit, Derek. We know everything. A pause. Then a laugh that chilled my blood. Do you? Do you really know everything, Alexis? Because I think you're about to discover that this situation is far more complicated than your Pentagon friends have told you. General Hawthorne was frantically signaling the technical team, who were working to trace the call while recording every word. She held up a tablet with typed instructions. Keep him talking. Get him to reveal locations. Why don't you enlighten me? I said, settling back in my chair with the kind of casual confidence I'd learned from interrogating enemy combatants. I've got your attention. Your father was never the mastermind, Alexis. He's a small-time accountant with delusions of grandeur and a serious gambling problem. Did your investigators mention the gambling problem? The offshore casino accounts, the debts to people who break kneecaps for late payments? My blood ran cold. This was new information. Vincent Rivera was desperate when I found him. Desperate and perfect. A man who already resented his daughter's success, already felt diminished by her achievements, already had the administrative access I needed to make this work. All I had to do was offer him a way to profit from the daughter he'd been too proud to ask for help. Derek's voice carried a note of pride, as if he were explaining a particularly elegant military strategy. You see, Alexis, your father didn't just steal money from the government. He stole it to pay gambling debts that would have resulted in his death if left unpaid. I saved his life, and in return, he gave me access to yours. Colonel Thompson was frantically typing on his secure terminal, cross-referencing Vincent Rivera's financial records with known gambling operations. Within seconds, he was showing me evidence I'd never seen: offshore accounts, cryptocurrency transactions, and debt payments to organizations flagged by federal law enforcement as criminal enterprises. My father hadn't just been greedy, he'd been desperate. But that's not the really interesting part, Derek continued. The interesting part is who else was involved. You see, Alexis, your father's gambling debts weren't to random casino operators. They were to very specific people. People with connections to defense contractors who had been looking for ways to access classified military procurement systems. The room went dead silent. This wasn't just fraud anymore. This was espionage. Are you telling me that foreign agents were involved in this operation? I'm telling you that your father's weakness created an opportunity that certain interested parties were eager to exploit. And I'm telling you that the procurement contracts we created weren't just about stealing money. They were about gaining access to information about American military capabilities, deployment schedules, and operational vulnerabilities. General Hawthorne activated her emergency communication system, sending coded alerts to Department of Defense security divisions. If Derek was telling the truth, this investigation had just become a matter of national security at the highest levels. The equipment that was supposedly being purchased through our fraudulent contracts, Derek continued, some of it actually existed, some of it was actually delivered, just not to the U.S. military. It was delivered to people who were very interested in understanding how American forces operate in hostile environments. My mind raced through the implications. You sold classified military equipment to foreign agents? I sold information, Alexis. Equipment specifications, operational procedures, communication protocols. Your signature was just the authorization mechanism. But the real value was the intelligence about how the U.S. military actually functions when it thinks its communications are secure. The technical team was frantically tracking Derek's location while simultaneously alerting counterintelligence agencies. This had escalated from a family betrayal to a potential international incident. Where are you, Derek? I'm somewhere your investigators will never find me. And I'm calling to offer you a choice, Alexis. A choice that will determine whether this situation gets much worse for people you care about. What choice? Your sister Natalia is a very intelligent young woman. Brilliant, actually. It would be unfortunate if something happened to her while she's trying to help your investigation. College campuses can be dangerous places, especially for young women who know too much about their father's business activities. The threat was crystal clear. Derek was holding my sister's safety hostage. You touch her, and I will hunt you down personally. I don't think you understand your position, Alexis. You're not the hunter anymore. You're the hunted. Because everyone who helped me steal from the government, everyone who received classified information, everyone who benefited from this operation, they all have something in common. They all want to make sure this investigation disappears quietly. General Hawthorne handed me a note. Protective detail dispatched to Natalia's location. Keep him talking. What do you want, Derek? I want you to convince your Pentagon friends to classify this entire investigation under national security protocols. Seal the records, drop the charges against your father, and let everyone involved disappear quietly. In exchange, your sister stays safe, your family avoids a very public trial that would destroy what's left of their reputation, and you get to keep pretending you're a hero instead of the victim of the most successful intelligence operation in recent military history. And if you refuse, then tomorrow morning, every major news outlet in the country receives a very detailed dossier about how Lieutenant Colonel Alexis Rivera's family has been living off stolen government money for years while she was supposedly serving her country overseas. The story writes itself. Decorated war hero discovers she's been profiting from fraud while claiming to sacrifice for her nation. The psychological warfare was sophisticated and brutal. Derek knew exactly how to attack my reputation, my family, and my sense of duty simultaneously. There's more, he continued. The gambling debts your father accumulated, they're not going away just because he's in federal custody. The people he owes money to don't recognize the authority of U.S. courts. They want their money, and they're willing to collect it from family members if the primary debtor is unavailable. Colonel Thompson showed me another document, intelligence reports about organized crime groups with connections to international arms dealers, groups that had been flagged for targeting military families when service members interfered with their operations. You have 48 hours to make your decision, Alexis. Convince your Pentagon friends to make this go away quietly, or watch everything you've built come crashing down in the most public way possible. And remember, your sister's safety depends on your cooperation. The line went dead. General Hawthorne activated the base's emergency protocols. This is now a code black situation. We have active threats against military personnel and their families by hostile foreign agents. Colonel Rivera, you and your sister are now under protective custody until we can neutralize these threats. Within minutes, the briefing room filled with agents from multiple federal agencies: FBI Counterintelligence, Defense Intelligence Agency, Naval Criminal Investigation Service, and specialists from agencies whose names I didn't recognize, but whose presence indicated this situation had escalated to the highest levels of national security concern.
Special Agent Rebecca Torres from the FBI approached me with a secure tablet. Colonel Rivera, we're going to need your complete cooperation to end this threat, but I need you to understand something. Derek Castellanos isn't just a rogue Marine anymore. Based on what we just heard, he's a foreign asset who's been operating inside our military for years. What does that mean for my family? It means we're going to catch him, and everyone he's working with. But it also means that until we do, you and your sister are targets of an international criminal organization that has already demonstrated its willingness to compromise American military operations. As federal agents coordinated protective details and intelligence specialists analyzed Derek's communications, I realized that my family's betrayal
had been just the entry point for a much larger conspiracy. The graduation ceremony that had started as personal humiliation had uncovered an espionage network that threatened national security. And Derek Castellanos, the man I'd trusted with my life for 3 years, was at the center of it all. Special Agent Torres spread out a massive array of evidence across 3 connected tables in the secure briefing room. What I saw made me understand why Derek Castellanos had been so confident during our phone call. This wasn't just fraud. It was the most sophisticated military intelligence operation I'd ever encountered. Colonel Rivera, what you're looking at represents 18 months of investigation across 7 different federal agencies. We've been tracking this network since irregularities first appeared in defense contractor payments, but we had no idea it was connected to your family until yesterday. The evidence was staggering in its scope and terrifying in its implications. The first table contained financial documents showing a web of shell companies, cryptocurrency transactions, and international wire transfers that spanned 12 countries. Vincent Rivera's gambling debts were just the beginning. The money trail led through casinos in Macau, real estate investments in Cyprus, and technology companies in Eastern Europe. Your father's initial gambling debt was $400,000 to the Kozlov organization, a Russian criminal enterprise with documented connections to state intelligence services. When he couldn't pay, they offered him an alternative: access to your daughter's military credentials in exchange for debt forgiveness and ongoing payments. Agent Torres pointed to a series of encrypted communications between Vincent and unknown parties. These messages show that your father was initially reluctant, but the Kozlov organization used Major Castellanos as an intermediary to convince him that the operation was low risk and highly profitable. The second table contained technical evidence that made my blood run cold. Derek hadn't just stolen money. He'd built an entire shadow infrastructure for stealing classified military information. Major Castellanos installed keylogger software on 17 different military computers at Quantico, Camp Pendleton, and 29 Palms. Every password, every classified document access, and every communication protocol used by Marines in your chain of command was being recorded and transmitted to external servers. The technical specialist, Dr. Kim, from the Defense Intelligence Agency, pulled up a series of screenshots showing captured data. Colonel Rivera, every email you sent, every operational report you filed, every strategic assessment you submitted was being copied and analyzed by foreign intelligence agencies in real time. My stomach dropped. How long? Based on the forensic analysis, at least 4 years, possibly longer. Major Castellanos had access to your operational patterns, your decision-making processes, your tactical preferences, and your strategic thinking. He was essentially providing foreign agents with a complete psychological and operational profile of one of the Marine Corps' most effective field commanders. Agent Torres activated a secure display showing a network analysis chart that looked like something from a spy thriller. The Kozlov organization sold this intelligence to at least 6 different buyers: Russian military intelligence, Chinese state security services, Iranian Revolutionary Guard units, North Korean cyber warfare divisions, and 2 terrorist organizations were not authorized to name in an unclassified briefing. The scope was breathtaking. My personal military service had been turned into a commodity for every major adversary of the United States. Colonel Rivera, Dr. Kim continued, some of the operations you led in Afghanistan and Iraq were compromised before you even arrived in theater. Enemy forces had advanced knowledge of your tactical approaches, your communication schedules, and your logistical requirements. The fact that you and your Marines survived is a testament to your adaptability and leadership under conditions that were intentionally sabotaged. I thought about every close call, every ambush that seemed too well coordinated, every supply shortage that had forced my units to improvise under fire. How many of my Marines died because of this intelligence leak? The room went silent. Agent Torres exchanged glances with General Hawthorne before answering. We're still conducting that analysis, Colonel, but preliminary assessments suggest that casualty rates in operations you commanded were statistically higher than comparable missions led by officers whose communications weren't compromised. The difference is significant enough to indicate enemy foreknowledge of your operational parameters. The implications were devastating. Derek Castellanos hadn't just stolen money and endangered my career, he'd gotten American Marines killed for profit. The third table contained the most damning evidence, documented proof that the conspiracy reached far beyond my family and extended into the highest level of military contracting and defense procurement. Major Castellanos wasn't working alone within the military, Agent Torres explained. We've identified at least 12 other active duty personnel across all service branches who were feeding information to the Kozlov organization. This was a systematic infiltration of American military communications, not a single rogue officer.
The operation was designed to identify high-performing officers with access to sensitive information and either recruit them directly or compromise them through family members, financial pressure, or blackmail. Your situation with Major Castellanos and your father was just one of multiple parallel operations. Dr. Kim pulled up a series of intercepted communications between Derek and his handlers. These messages showed that Major Castellanos was being paid a percentage of all intelligence sales related to information he provided. Over 4 years, he earned approximately $1.2 million selling classified information about American military operations. The financial records showed deposits to Derek's accounts that coincided exactly with major operations I'd led overseas. Every successful mission I'd completed had generated profit for the man who'd been systematically undermining my effectiveness and endangering my Marines. But here's the evidence that will destroy him, Agent Torres said, pulling out a thick folder marked with the highest classification levels. Major Castellanos documented everything. He kept detailed records of every intelligence transaction, every piece of classified information he sold, every payment he received. He apparently believed that comprehensive documentation would protect him if he was ever discovered. She spread out hundreds of pages of Derek's handwritten notes, typed reports, and financial calculations. He recorded the dates, amounts, and intelligence value of every transaction. He documented which foreign agencies were purchasing specific types of information. He even calculated the operational impact of intelligence sales on American military effectiveness. The evidence was a prosecutor's dream and Derek's complete destruction. He documented his own treason in exhaustive detail. There's more, Dr. Kim said, activating another screen. Major Castellanos also recorded video conferences with his foreign contacts. We have dozens of hours of footage showing him discussing classified American military capabilities with confirmed Russian and Chinese intelligence officers. The videos were damning beyond description. Derek, in uniform, sitting in what appeared to be his personal residence, calmly discussing American tactical vulnerabilities with people whose faces matched international terrorist watch lists. Colonel Rivera, this evidence doesn't just prove that Major Castellanos committed treason, it proves that he's been operating as a foreign agent for years while serving in positions of trust within the Marine Corps. This is espionage at the highest levels. Agent Torres gathered the evidence into secure containers. With this documentation, we can dismantle the entire network. But we need your help to do it safely. Derek Castellanos knows we're closing in, and desperate foreign agents have been known to eliminate evidence, including human evidence, when their operations are threatened. What do you need from me? We need you to help us set a trap. Derek thinks he has leverage over you because of the threats against your sister and the potential public humiliation of your family. We want him to believe he's won, while we position assets to capture him and his entire network simultaneously. Dr. Kim pulled up a tactical map showing locations across 3 states where suspected network members were currently operating. This is a coordinated takedown involving federal agents, military police, international law enforcement, and counterintelligence specialists. We get one chance to catch them all before they disappear into countries that don't extradite suspected spies. When do we move? Tomorrow morning. Derek gave you 48 hours to make a decision about covering up the investigation. We're going to let him think you're cooperating while we execute simultaneous raids on 17 different locations." General Hawthorne stood up, her expression grim but determined. "Colonel Rivera, this operation will effectively end the most successful foreign intelligence penetration of the U.S. military in decades, but it will also expose your family's involvement in ways that will be very difficult for them to survive socially or legally." "General, my family chose to betray me long before foreign agents got involved. I'm not going to let American Marines continue dying to protect people who sold out their own daughter for gambling money and wounded pride." As federal agents prepared for the largest counterintelligence operation in recent memory, I realized that Derek Castellanos had made one critical error in his years of meticulous planning. He'd underestimated the woman whose life he'd been trying to destroy. And tomorrow morning, he was going to discover exactly what a highly trained, deeply motivated Marine Corps officer could accomplish when she stopped being the target and started being the hunter. At 0500 hours, I stood in the Tactical Operations Center at Westover Air Reserve Base, watching 17 different live feeds as federal agents prepared to simultaneously execute the largest counterintelligence operation in Marine Corps history. My phone was programmed to call Derek Castellanos at exactly 600 hours, the moment I was supposed to tell him I'd convinced the Pentagon to cover up his espionage network. Instead, I was about to watch him get arrested for treason. "Operation Fallen Honor is authorized to commence. All teams, you are green to execute." The screens lit up with coordinated action across the eastern seaboard. SWAT teams approached safe houses in Virginia. FBI agents surrounded the Kozlov Organization's Financial Operations Center in New York. Military police converged on suspected officers at 3 different bases. International law enforcement partners moved against assets in Canada and the United Kingdom. But the main event was happening 12 miles from where I stood. Derek Castellanos was holed up in a cabin in the Berkshire Mountains, apparently believing that his threats against my family had bought him time to escape the country. What he didn't know was that we'd been tracking his location since the moment he'd made that phone call, and the cabin was now surrounded by the most elite tactical units the federal government could deploy.
"Colonel Rivera," Agent Torres said, handing me the secure phone, "it's time to make your call. Remember, we need him to stay on the line long enough for the assault teams to breach his location. Keep him talking, keep him confident, and let him think he's won." I took the phone, my hands steady despite the magnitude of what was about to happen. 20 years of military service had led to this moment, the complete destruction of a man who'd betrayed everything I'd sworn to protect. Derek answered on the second ring. "Alexis, I was hoping you'd make the smart choice. Please tell me you've convinced your Pentagon friends to see reason." "I've convinced them, Derek. The investigation is being classified under national security protocols. All charges against my father are being dropped, and the procurement fraud is being sealed under executive privilege." A pause. I could hear him breathing, probably savoring what he thought was his victory over the system that had failed to recognize his brilliance. "And your sister's safety is guaranteed? Natalia has been moved to a secure location where she'll remain until all parties involved in this situation have been relocated to safe jurisdictions. Your concerns about her well-being were taken very seriously." On the tactical screens, I watched assault teams moving into position around Derek's cabin. Snipers were establishing fields of fire, explosive ordnance disposal specialists were scanning for booby traps, communications specialists were jamming all cellular and internet signals in a 2-mile radius. "You know, Alexis, I'm almost proud of you," Derek continued, his voice carrying that familiar tone of condescension I'd endured for 3 years. "For once in your career, you've made a decision based on practical reality instead of idealistic nonsense about duty and honor. Sometimes reality requires compromise." Exactly. And the reality is that people like you, people who believe in the system, who trust their superiors, who follow orders without question, are always going to be vulnerable to people like me, people who understand that the system is just a game, and the only thing that matters is knowing how to play it better than everyone else. The assault team leader was holding up his hand, counting down on his fingers. 3, 2, 1. "Derek, I said, my voice calm and clear. There's something I need you to understand about the system. What's that? It's designed to catch people exactly like you. The cabin erupted in controlled chaos. Flashbang grenades shattered the windows. Smoke poured through every opening. Tactical officers in full combat gear swarmed through multiple entry points with military precision that would have made Derek's old unit proud if he hadn't been too busy selling them out to foreign agents. Derek's scream of rage and terror came through the phone clearly enough for everyone in the operations center to hear. The sound of his world collapsing in real time was deeply satisfying. "Target secured," came the voice of the assault team leader over the radio. "Major Derek Castellanos is in custody. Seized multiple computers, encrypted communication devices, and approximately $400,000 in cash and gold. Also recovered classified documents bearing the stamps of agencies I'm not authorized to name over unsecured channels." General Hawthorne activated the all teams communication system. "All units, report status." The responses came in rapid succession from across the operational area. New York team. Kozlov Organization Financial Center secured. 18 subjects in custody, including 2 individuals on international terrorism watch lists. Virginia team. Military contractor safe house breached. Recovered servers containing classified defense information and communications with confirmed foreign intelligence services. Quantico team. Colonel James Morrison in custody. Seized evidence includes payment records from foreign accounts and classified procurement documents. Pendleton team. Major Lisa Chen secured. Found evidence of systematic intelligence collection dating back 6 years. 17 operations, 17 successful raids, 17 pieces of a massive espionage puzzle that had just been completely dismantled in a single coordinated strike. But the most important victory was personal. "Colonel Rivera," Agent Torres said, showing me a live feed from Derek's arrest, "Major Castellanos is asking to speak with you. He's claiming he has information about additional security threats that he'll only reveal to you personally." I looked at the screen showing Derek in handcuffs, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. The man who'd spent years manipulating my family, endangering my Marines, and selling classified information to America's enemies was now reduced to a common criminal begging for a deal. "Tell Major Castellanos that Lieutenant Colonel Rivera has no interest in anything he has to say. His opinion stopped mattering to me the moment he chose treason over honor." Dr. Kim approached with a preliminary analysis of the seized evidence. "Colonel Rivera, the initial assessment indicates that this network was responsible for intelligence leaks that compromised at least 47 separate military operations over the past 5 years. The damage to American national security interests is estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars." "What about casualties?" "We're still analyzing operational reports, but preliminary data suggests that intelligence sold by this network may have contributed to enemy actions that resulted in American military casualties. We'll have a complete assessment within 72 hours. The implications were staggering. Derek Castellanos hadn't just committed financial fraud, he'd sold information that got American service members killed in combat. "General Hawthorne," I said, "what happens to my family now? Your father will face federal charges for his role in the procurement fraud, but his cooperation with the investigation and his status as a victim of foreign manipulation will be considered during sentencing. Your mother appears to have been genuinely unaware of the criminal enterprise. Your sister was clearly a victim who had no knowledge of the illegal activities. And the public exposure Derek threatened?"
There won't be any. This entire operation is classified at the highest levels. The official story is that a routine audit discovered irregularities in defense contractor payments, leading to the discovery of a broader espionage network. Your family's involvement will remain sealed under national security protocols. Agent Torres handed me a final report that represented the complete dismantling of Derek Castellanos' life. "Colonel Rivera, Major Castellanos will face charges of espionage, treason, conspiracy against the United States, wire fraud, money laundering, and accessory to murder in connection with the deaths of American service members whose operations were compromised by intelligence he sold to foreign agents. He's looking at multiple life sentences without possibility of parole. As I read through the charges, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete vindication. The man who'd spent a decade trying to destroy my career, my family, and my life was going to spend the rest of his existence in a federal supermax prison, forgotten by history and abandoned by the foreign agents who'd used him. "Colonel Rivera," General Hawthorne said, "there's one more thing. The Commandant of the Marine Corps has requested that you consider accepting a promotion to full colonel and a transfer to the Pentagon, where you'd oversee counterintelligence operations designed to prevent this type of infiltration in the future. Your experience as a victim of espionage, combined with your operational expertise, makes you uniquely qualified to protect other service members from similar threats." 6 months later, I stood at another graduation ceremony. This time, I was wearing my colonel's eagles and presenting awards to Marines who'd completed advanced counterintelligence training. My parents sat in the front row, their faces reflecting a mixture of pride and shame that would probably define our relationship for the rest of our lives. Derek Castellanos was serving consecutive life sentences at ADX Florence, the federal supermax prison in Colorado. His foreign contacts had been neutralized or captured. The espionage network that had operated for years within the American military was completely destroyed. But the most important victory wasn't professional. It was personal. The daughter they dismissed as a failure was now Colonel Alexis Rivera, Director of Military Counterintelligence Operations, responsible for protecting the integrity of the United States Marine Corps against foreign infiltration. The woman they'd erased from their family story had become the author of the most successful counter-espionage operation in recent military history. And every morning when I put on my uniform, I remembered that sometimes the people who tried to destroy you end up giving you exactly the motivation you need to become stronger than they ever imagined possible. The 500 Marines who'd saluted me at Natalia's graduation had been honoring more than my service record. They'd been honoring my survival of betrayals that would have broken most people, and my transformation from victim to victor in a war I'd never known I was fighting. Some battles are won with weapons and tactics. Others are won with patience, integrity, and the absolute refusal to let the people who hurt you define who you become. Derek Castellanos learned that lesson too late to save himself. But it was never too late for me to save the Marines who would serve after me.